My sister-in-law publicly humiliated me online, calling herself blessed for not being the struggling one, then tagged me for everyone to see. My daughter faced the mockery at school while I swallowed the shame in silence. I didn't respond. But days later, one unexpected email exposed how fragile her power really was. I found out the same way 300 other people did, through a public Facebook post I never asked to be part of. My phone buzzed 47 times between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. while I was helping Mrs. Brennan through her post-surgical care routine, checking her vitals, administering her medications, doing the work that somehow made me the subject of Vanessa's gratitude sermon. When I finally looked at the screen in my car, exhausted, hands dry and cracked from constant sanitizing, my 2009 Honda Civic idling in the pre-dawn cold, I saw her first. Dr. Vanessa Chin Patterson in all her curated glory, photographed like a magazine spread, sitting at a marble desk that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Grateful this morning for the life we've built through education, discipline, and smart choices. Some people make excuses. Some people make moves. The words were bad enough. But then I scrolled down and saw what she tagged me in. A photo of my apartment complex with a caption that felt like a public execution. So thankful I'm not still living like this. At Claire Patterson, praying you find the motivation to change your situation. My vision blurred. Not from tears, I was too shocked for tears yet. From the pure disorientation of seeing my private life turned into someone else's inspiration porn. The comments had already started. People I'd never met weighing in on my choices, my life, my worth. So true. It's all about mindset, wrote someone named Jennifer with a profile picture of her dog. Another comment, this one from someone who'd apparently gone to medical school with Vanessa. You've always been such an inspiration, V. Some people just don't want to put in the work. But the one that made my chest tighten was from someone who knew exactly who I was. Isn't that Michael Patterson's widow? So sad she couldn't keep it together after he passed. For years. Michael had been gone for 4 years, and someone thought it appropriate to measure my grief against Vanessa's marble desk and floor-to-ceiling windows. I sat there in my car, the engine running to keep some warmth circulating, watching the number tick up. 319 likes now, 48 comments. Each notification felt like another person walking past my life, glancing in, making a judgment and moving on. The clock on my dashboard read 6:52 a.m. I had another patient to see at 8 o'clock, which meant I had just enough time to go home, shower, change into clean scrubs and maybe, close my eyes for 20 minutes. But first I had to figure out how to tell Emma that her aunt had just made us both targets. My daughter. Gut Emma. I thought about her waking up in our apartment, probably already dressed in her Riverside prep uniform, the one we'd bought from the thrift store run by the school's parent association, gently used but perfectly acceptable. She'd be making herself toast because I wasn't there to make her breakfast, packing her lunch because we both knew the cafeteria food cost more than we could justify spending. She'd check her phone while she ate, scrolling through the group chats and social media feeds that connected her to classmates who lived in houses with 3-car garages and took spring break trips to Aruba. And she'd see this. Or worse, someone would show it to her. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to think clearly through the exhaustion. Should I call her? Text her? Warning her felt necessary, but what would I even say? Honey, your Aunt Vanessa just told the internet I'm a failure, so prepare yourself for school today? My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another stranger with an opinion about my life. I turned it off completely, shifted my car into drive and headed home. Emma was already gone by the time I got back to the apartment. I knew she'd left early, she always did on debate team mornings, catching a ride with her teammate Sophie's mom rather than taking the bus. The note on the kitchen counter confirmed it. Morning practice. Home by 4. Love you, Mom. The handwriting was careful, precise. Emma's handwriting had always been like that, even when she was small. Controlled. Measured. She'd learned early to take up exactly the right amount of space. Never too much, never asking for more than what was absolutely necessary. I stood in our small kitchen, still wearing my scrubs from the night shift, and looked around the apartment Vanessa had photographed. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room barely big enough for our second-hand couch and the bookshelf Michael had built the year before he died. The carpet was clean but worn. The walls were white because repainting wasn't in our budget. Through the window I could see the parking lot, the dumpsters, the chain-link fence separating our complex from the strip mall next door. This was what Vanessa was thankful she'd escaped. This was what she'd held up as evidence of my failures. I showered quickly, letting the hot water run over my aching shoulders. The medical bag I'd need for my next patient sat by the door, already packed. Blood pressure cuff, stethoscope, sterile gloves, wound care supplies, medication log sheets. Everything I needed to walk into someone's home and provide the kind of care that kept them alive, kept them comfortable, kept them connected to their humanity when their bodies were failing them. But apparently that work wasn't enough to earn respect from someone who'd married into money and medical prestige. I dressed in fresh scrubs, navy blue today, the pair without any stains or fraying at the cuffs. Pulled my hair back into the same ponytail I wore every day. Checked my phone, which I'd turned back on, and found 17 new notifications. I didn't open Facebook. Couldn't make myself look at whatever new comments had accumulated. Instead, I texted Emma. Hope practice went well. I'm thinking about you. Love you so much. She didn't respond immediately. She was probably in class by now, phone tucked away, trying to focus on chemistry or English literature while carrying the weight of whatever she'd already seen, already heard. I wanted to call Robert. My brother-in-law, Michael's younger brother, the man who'd stood beside us at Michael's funeral and promised he'd always be there for us. But Robert had made his choice when he married Vanessa 3 years ago. He'd chosen comfort over conflict, chosen his wife's version of reality over the truth he knew about how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed. The last time I'd spoken to Robert was Christmas, when he'd sent a gift card to Target with a note that said, "For whatever you and Emma need." $200, as if that somehow balanced out the distance he'd created, the family gatherings he no longer invited us to, the nephew-uncle relationship Emma barely had with him anymore. No, I wouldn't call Robert. He'd already shown me where his loyalties lived. I grabbed my keys, my medical bag, and headed back out into the cold February morning. I didn't know what happened at Riverside Prep until much later. Emma didn't tell me, not that day, not that week. She protected me the way she'd been protecting me since Michael died, swallowing her pain so I wouldn't have to carry it alongside my own. But eventually I pieced it together from the small details that slipped through her careful defenses. Madison Whitmore showed her the post during lunch period. Emma had been sitting at her usual table near the windows, eating the sandwich she'd packed that morning, reviewing note cards for an upcoming debate tournament. Madison approached with her phone already out, screen tilted so the girls around her could see. "Is this your apartment, Emma?" Madison's voice carried that particular tone wealthy teenage girls master early, curiosity wrapped around cruelty, questions designed to humiliate rather than inform. "My mom says your family is on scholarship. Is that why your mom is like a maid?" Emma told me later, weeks later when she finally broke down, that she'd stared at the phone screen showing Vanessa's post, showing our apartment building, showing the caption that reduced my career to a punchline. She'd felt the eyes of everyone at the table turning toward her, waiting to see how she'd respond. She'd said nothing. Just packed up her lunch, gathered her note cards, and walked to the library where she spent the rest of the period pretending to study while the words echoed in her head. "So thankful I'm not still living like this." By the end of the school day, someone had made a meme using Vanessa's photo and caption, adding their own commentary. It circulated through the sophomore class group chat. Emma's debate partner, a girl named Ashley who'd been her friend since freshman year, sent a text asking if she could switch partners for the upcoming tournament. "Family emergency, very sorry, nothing personal." Emma's chemistry lab group forgot to add her to their project group chat. The following day when she asked about it, they said they'd tried but maybe her number had changed. The lie was transparent, but no one bothered to make it convincing. She came home that first day with red, swollen eyes, but when I asked what was wrong she said she was just tired. Fighting off a cold maybe. Needed to sleep. I believed her because I wanted to. Because acknowledging the truth meant acknowledging that I couldn't protect her from this, couldn't fix it, couldn't make it better. We ate dinner in our small kitchen. Spaghetti with Jared sauce, salad from a bag, garlic bread I'd made from the ends of a loaf going stale. We talked about her classes, about whether she needed new debate shoes, about anything except the post that had detonated in both our lives. After dinner, Emma went to her room to study. I heard her door click shut, heard the lock turn, something she never usually did. I stood outside for a moment, wanting to knock, wanting to force the conversation we both needed. But I was too ashamed. Too raw. Too afraid that if I tried to talk about Vanessa's post, I'd end up defending choices I'd stopped believing in myself. So I went to my own room, lay on my bed fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling until my alarm went off at 10 p.m. for my next overnight shift. I didn't respond to Vanessa's post. Didn't comment, didn't share a counter-narrative, didn't defend myself. What would I even say? That I worked 3 jobs because Michael's life insurance barely covered his funeral? That Emma's scholarship to Riverside Prep was the only reason she had a chance at the kind of college education that might break the cycle of financial precarity I'd been trapped in since his death? That my apartment with its worn carpet and chain-link fence view was still the safest, cleanest place I could afford in a school district that wouldn't fail my daughter? None of that would matter to the people liking and sharing Vanessa's post. They wanted a simple story: success versus failure, motivation versus laziness, winners versus losers. Complexity didn't fit in a caption with prayer hands and sparkle emojis. So I stayed silent and went to work. Mrs. Brennan needed her blood pressure checked twice daily and help with her medication routine. Mr. Harrison, recovering from a stroke, required assistance with bathing and dressing. The Rodriguez family had hired me to provide overnight care for their mother, who had advanced Alzheimer's and wandered if left alone. Each patient needed me present, focused, compassionate, not distracted by social media drama or family betrayal. I showed up for each shift with the same gentle smile I always wore. I checked vitals, administered medications, changed wound dressings, helped people to the bathroom, listened to their stories about children and grandchildren and lives that had been full before illness narrowed their worlds. I documented everything carefully in their medical charts, called their doctors when something seemed off, advocated for better pain management or physical therapy or whatever they needed to maintain dignity in bodies that were failing them. My supervisor, Linda, noticed something was off during our weekly check-in call. "You sound tired, Claire." "More than usual." "Just a rough week," I said, which wasn't a lie. "You taking care of yourself? I know you tend to put everyone else first." I promised I was fine, that I'd get more sleep, that everything was manageable. Linda had been a home health nurse for 20 years before moving into administration. She knew what manageable actually meant in this field. Barely holding on, stretched too thin, but still showing up because patients depended on you. At night, lying awake in the few hours between shifts, I replayed every financial decision I'd made since Michael died. Should I have taken that medical billing job instead of staying in home health care? It would have meant steady hours, benefits, an office instead of driving between patients' houses. But it also would have meant leaving behind the work I was actually good at, the work that felt like carrying on Michael's legacy of service. Should I have moved Emma to public school after freshman year, saved the tuition assistance fees and uniform costs? But Riverside Prep's college placement rate was 98%, and Emma's guidance counselor said she had a real shot at Ivy League schools with her grades and debate record. Should I have sold the small life insurance policy Michael left, used it to pay off our credit cards, maybe had enough left over for a security deposit on a better apartment? But that policy was the only financial safety net we had. The only thing standing between us and complete disaster if my car broke down or Emma needed emergency medical care. Every choice led back to the same truth. I'd done the best I could with what I had. But Vanessa's post suggested that wasn't enough, that motivation and smart choices could overcome systemic barriers, that my circumstances were somehow a moral failing rather than an economic reality. The shame of almost believing her burrowed deep, whispering that maybe she was right. On the 5th day after Vanessa's post, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Philadelphia area code, but not one I'd saved. I almost didn't answer. I was between patients, sitting in my car outside a CVS where I'd stopped to pick up supplies I'd need for my next visit. My hands hurt. The constant sanitizing and hand-washing left them perpetually dry, cracked at the knuckles despite the lotion I applied religiously. I was tired in that bone-deep way that comes from not enough sleep and too much emotional weight. But something made me swipe to answer. "Is this Claire Patterson?" The voice was female, older, cultured in that way that suggested education and resources. "Yes, this is Claire. My name is Margaret Walsh. I'm calling because I need home health care assistance, and your agency gave me your number as someone who might be available." I pulled up my calendar, checked my schedule. I had some flexibility in the afternoons, could probably fit in another regular patient if the timing worked. "What kind of care do you need, Mrs. Walsh?" "Post-surgical support. I had a cosmetic procedure 3 months ago, and I'm still experiencing complications." Her voice wavered slightly. My doctor isn't returning my calls, and I need someone who knows what they're doing to help me manage the recovery. We arranged a time for me to come assess her needs. She lived in Gladwine, one of the wealthier suburbs on the main line. The address she gave me was in a neighborhood where houses started at 7 figures. I hung up and sat in my car for a moment, staring at the notation I'd added to my calendar. Margaret Walsh, 2 p.m. tomorrow, post-op complications. Something about her voice had resonated with me. The shakiness beneath the composed exterior, the vulnerability of someone trying to ask for help when help should have been freely given. I recognized it because I'd heard it in my own voice more times than I could count over the past 4 years. The next afternoon I drove to Gladwine with my medical bag and low expectations. Wealthy patients sometimes struggled with home health aides. They wanted service but resented needing it, wanted help but couldn't quite reconcile hiring someone for intimate care tasks. I'd learned to maintain professional boundaries, to be warm without being familiar, to provide excellent care without expecting friendship or recognition. Margaret Walsh's home was a Victorian painted in shades of cream and sage, with a wraparound porch and gardens that probably required a full-time landscaper. I parked on the street, grabbed my bag and walked up the front steps. She answered the door herself, moving slowly. Mid-70s, I guessed, though it was hard to tell with the partial bandaging still on her face. She wore elegant loungewear, expensive even by my limited ability to judge such things, and her home smelled like lavender and old books. "Mrs. Walsh? I'm Claire Patterson. Please come in. And call me Margaret." Her home was beautiful in a lived-in way that contrasted sharply with what I imagined Vanessa's showcase mansion looked like. Artwork covered the walls. Original paintings, not prints. Photographs in silver frames showed children and grandchildren at various ages. Books overflowed from built-in shelves. A baby grand piano sat in the corner of the living room, sheet music open on the stand. Margaret led me to her kitchen where we could sit and talk before I did my assessment. "I'm a retired art teacher," she explained as she carefully lowered herself into a chair. 35 years at the same high school. My husband passed 2 years ago and I've been alone since. My children live out of state, California and Oregon. They wanted me to move closer, but this is my home. I understood that immediately. Home wasn't always about the building. It was about memory, about connection to a life that felt authentic even when circumstances changed. "Tell me about your surgery," I said gently. Margaret's face tightened, a flash of pain crossing her features that had nothing to do with physical discomfort. "I had a facelift. Nothing extreme. I wasn't trying to look 30 again. Just wanted to feel more like myself, address some of the sagging that made me avoid mirrors." She touched the bandaging carefully. "The procedure was 3 months ago. The surgeon said recovery would take 6 weeks, maybe 8. But I've had excessive swelling, irregular bruising, and now I think there might be nerve damage. The left side of my face doesn't move quite right." I kept my expression neutral, professional. "Have you followed up with your surgeon?" "I've tried." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've called 17 times. Left messages with her office staff, sent emails, even tried showing up at the practice once. Her assistant said she'd call me back, but she never has." "Who was your surgeon?" I asked, though something in my chest was already bracing for the answer. Margaret met my eyes. "Dr. Vanessa Patterson." The kitchen tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table, forcing myself to maintain composure even as my mind raced. "I see," I managed. "Let me examine the surgical site and see what we're dealing with." I spent the next 30 minutes conducting a thorough assessment. The scarring was more extensive than it should have been for a standard facelift. The swelling Margaret described wasn't normal at this point in recovery. And when I asked her to move different parts of her face, smile, raise her eyebrows, close her eyes tightly, the asymmetry was obvious. The left side lagged, indicating probable nerve involvement. "Margaret," I said carefully, "I think you need to see another plastic surgeon for a second opinion. These complications shouldn't be ignored." She looked at me with eyes that held too much understanding. "I tried that too. But Dr. Patterson's office sent me a letter when I requested my medical records. Her lawyer said I signed comprehensive waivers and that any complications are my own fault for not following post-operative instructions." She laughed bitterly. "I followed every instruction. I did everything she told me to do." We sat in her kitchen, 2 women trapped in different versions of the same powerlessness. Margaret with her nerve damage and legal threats. Me with my daughter's anxiety and public humiliation. I'll help you, I said quietly. Let me come back 3 times a week to check on your recovery, manage any wound care needs and document everything carefully. And Margaret, if you still have those medical records, the letter from the lawyer, any communication from Dr. Patterson's office, keep them somewhere safe. She nodded slowly. You're not the first person to tell me that. I actually requested my complete medical file before I got too frightened. They sent it, but I think they included some things they didn't mean to. My pulse quickened. What kind of things? Margaret rose carefully, walked to a sideboard in her dining room, and returned with a thick manila envelope. See for yourself. I didn't open the envelope at Margaret's house. Something told me I needed privacy for whatever was inside, needed time to process without her watching my reactions. Can I take this home tonight? I asked. Review it carefully, maybe photograph anything that seems important? Margaret nodded. I trust you, Claire. I can tell the difference between someone who actually cares and someone just going through the motions. You care. I drove home with the envelope on my passenger seat, hyper-aware of it the entire drive. Emma was at debate practice, wouldn't be home until after 6. I had 2 hours alone in the apartment. I made coffee, real coffee, not the instant kind I usually settled for, and spread the contents of the envelope across our small dining table. Standard operative reports. Consent forms. Preoperative instructions. Postoperative care guidelines. Everything you'd expect in a medical file. But then, buried in the middle of the stack, pages that clearly shouldn't have been there. Internal office communications. Emails between Vanessa and her medical assistant, marked staff only, do not file. I read them with growing horror. Mrs. Walsh called again about the swelling. What should I tell her? Same as before, it's normal, give it more time. If she keeps calling, let her know we'll have to start charging for consultation time. Another exchange dated 6 weeks after Margaret's surgery. She's requesting a follow-up appointment. Says the left side of her face isn't moving right. Nerve issues resolve on their own usually. Tell her to massage the area and take ibuprofen. No appointment necessary. I photographed each page with shaking hands, storing them in a password-protected folder on my phone. But the most damning evidence came near the bottom of the stack. Preoperative photographs that had clearly been digitally altered. I could see it in the inconsistent lighting, the subtle blur around the areas of concern Margaret had wanted addressed. The alterations made her original concerns appear less severe, which would justify a less extensive and less expensive procedure than what Margaret actually needed. Someone in Vanessa's office had manipulated medical photographs to underbill insurance and overcharge the patient. And then I found something that made my breath catch. An email from Robert Patterson, Michael's brother, my brother-in-law, to Margaret Walsh, dated 4 months before her surgery. Margaret, I heard you were considering facial rejuvenation. I want to personally recommend my sister-in-law, Dr. Vanessa Chin Patterson. She's one of the most skilled cosmetic surgeons in the Philadelphia area, and she'll take excellent care of you. Family referral. Tell her office I sent you and she'll give you the VIP treatment. Robert had referred Margaret directly to Vanessa. Had vouched for her skills, her care, her trustworthiness. And now Margaret sat in her beautiful Victorian home with nerve damage and no accountability. I sat at my dining table surrounded by evidence of medical negligence and deliberate fraud, and finally understood something crucial. Vanessa's success wasn't built on excellence. It was built on a foundation of harmed patients who'd been too frightened, too exhausted, or too intimidated to fight back. My phone buzzed. Emma texting from practice. Running late, Mom. Probably home by 7. Sorry. I typed back. No problem, sweetheart. Take your time. Then I did something I hadn't done since Vanessa's post went viral 5 days ago. I opened Facebook. The post was still there, still accumulating likes and comments. 389 likes now. 67 comments. Most of them positive, supportive of Vanessa's honesty and inspiration. But I noticed something I hadn't before. Mixed among the praise were a few comments that had been deleted, visible only as gaps in the conversation thread. Someone would reference comment number 34, but that comment no longer existed. Someone else would reply to a concern that had been scrubbed from the visible record. Vanessa was curating her narrative, deleting anything that contradicted the image she wanted to project. I closed Facebook and opened a new document on my laptop. Started typing everything I knew, everything Margaret had shared, every detail from the medical records I'd photographed. I didn't know yet what I'd do with this information, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. Over the next week, I fell into a routine that left me even more exhausted than usual. By day, I cared for my regular patients and added Margaret to my schedule. 3 visits a week, carefully documenting her recovery, noting every asymmetry and complication. By night, after Emma went to bed, I researched. I started with Vanessa's online presence. Her practice website showcased glowing testimonials, before and after photos, credentials from prestigious medical institutions. Her Instagram had 45,000 followers and featured a carefully curated feed. Surgical results, motivational quotes, photos from medical conferences, glimpses into her luxury lifestyle. But when I dug deeper, I found cracks in the facade. Her Google reviews showed an unusual pattern. Clusters of 5-star ratings followed by sudden 1-star reviews that had been responded to by the practice with nearly identical language. "We're sorry you're disappointed with your results. As discussed during your consultation, all surgical procedures carry risks, which you acknowledged in your signed consent forms." I found a closed Facebook group called Cosmetic Surgery Support Philadelphia, with 247 members. The description said it was a space for people to share experiences and support each other through recovery. I created a new profile, vague name, generic photo, no identifying information, and requested to join. Approval came within an hour. I spent the next 3 nights reading through months of posts, searching for mentions of Vanessa's name. Found 8 separate threads discussing complications from Dr. Patterson's procedures. One woman wrote, "She operated on my mother last year. Mom was 68, wanted a facelift for her 50th wedding anniversary. The results were good initially, but then Mom developed permanent nerve damage. Can't fully close her left eye now, has to use drops constantly. When we tried to address it with Dr. CP, her office sent a legal letter threatening to sue us for defamation. They claimed Mom's age made her high risk, but that was never mentioned before surgery." Another post from someone anonymous. "She pressured me into additional procedures while I was in the pre-op room, already sedated and groggy. I woke up with work done that I never consented to, lip fillers and Botox I specifically said I didn't want during my consultation. The bill was $12,000 more than originally quoted. When I complained, she said I must have agreed while nervous and forgotten. But I remember. I said no." A third person shared. "The before photos she took during my consultation didn't match the ones in my medical file. I requested copies and noticed the lighting was different. My features looked more exaggerated in the official photos than what she showed me in her office. I think she manipulates images to make your before state look worse, so the after looks more impressive." I created a document carefully cataloging each case I found. Sarah M. 52 facelift resulting in chronic pain and scarring. Diana R. 61 rhinoplasty leading to breathing problems. Anonymous user 45 breast augmentation with size discrepancy. Patricia Ellis mother 68 nerve damage from facelift. Jennifer T. 38 unauthorized procedures during surgery. Anonymous user 54 manipulated preoperative photographs. Margaret Walsh 73 nerve damage and medical abandonment. Lucia H. 49 keloid scarring and infection. 8 women. 8 similar patterns. Upselling, complications, postoperative abandonment, legal intimidation. But then I found something that made everything click into place. A cached news article from 2 years ago, removed from the medical board's public website but still accessible through Internet archives. State Medical Board investigates Center City cosmetic surgeon for performing procedures outside specialty training. The article was brief, vague in its details to protect patient privacy. But it named Dr. Vanessa Patterson as the subject of the investigation and noted that the inquiry had been dropped after insufficient evidence to proceed with disciplinary action. I dug deeper using my limited understanding of public record searches. Found the case file number, requested documentation from the State Medical Board. While I waited for their response, I called the law office listed on Margaret's cease and desist letter. The receptionist answered, "Morrison and Associates, how may I direct your call?" I'm calling about a legal letter your firm sent on behalf of Dr. Vanessa Chin Patterson, I said, keeping my voice professional. Can you tell me if you've sent similar letters to other patients of Dr. Patterson's? Long pause. I'm sorry, I can't discuss client matters. If you have a legal concern, you'll need to speak with an attorney about representation. I understand. Thank you. But the pause had told me what I needed to know. This wasn't the first time Vanessa's practice had used legal threats to silence patients. I sat at my laptop in the blue glow of the screen, Emma sleeping down the hall, my coffee long gone cold. The evidence spread before me told a clear story. Vanessa's entire professional success was built on cutting corners, pressuring vulnerable patients, and intimidating anyone who tried to hold her accountable. And Robert had enabled it. Had referred patients to her, had testified on her behalf during the medical board investigation, had chosen professional loyalty over patient safety. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The state medical board responding to my records request. The file was attached, heavily redacted but still revealing. 2 years ago, a patient had filed a formal complaint alleging Vanessa performed a complex facial reconstruction procedure she wasn't specifically trained for, resulting in complications that required corrective surgery by another specialist. The investigation had included witness statements, medical expert reviews, and documentary evidence. And then abruptly it stopped. The complainant withdrew her complaint. The investigator's notes, visible in fragments around the redactions, suggested, patient reports exhaustion from legal process. Defendant's counsel has engaged in extensive motion practice that complainant cannot financially sustain. Vanessa's lawyers had buried her in paperwork until she gave up. The final notation in the file. Character witness Dr. Robert Patterson provided statement affirming defendant's surgical competence and professional integrity. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment, listening to the sound of traffic on the street below, the distant wail of a siren that made me think of Michael. My husband had died running into a burning building to save people he didn't know. That was the choice he'd made. Service over safety, others over self. And I was sitting here with evidence that could protect future patients from harm, that could give voice to women who'd been intimidated into silence, that could challenge the narrative that success and integrity were the same thing. But I was terrified. Terrified of Vanessa's lawyers, of public exposure, of losing the little stability Emma and I had built. Then I thought about my daughter, carrying the shame of Vanessa's posts through school hallways every day, learning that cruelty was rewarded and silence was survival. What was I teaching her by doing nothing? I didn't tell Emma what I'd discovered. Didn't want to add that weight to everything else she was carrying. But Emma was carrying more than I realized, and she was about to make a choice that would change everything. The Women in Medicine Assembly at Riverside Prep was announced 2 weeks after Vanessa's post. Emma came home with the flyer, glossy, professionally designed, featuring a photograph of Vanessa in her white coat looking confident and accomplished. They invited her to speak, Emma said quietly, handing me the paper. Mrs. Henderson arranged it. Her daughter Madison is in my class. Madison Whitmore's mother. The woman whose daughter had shown Emma the post during lunch that first day. I stared at the flyer. When is it? Next Friday. Attendance is mandatory for all students. You don't have to go, I said immediately. I'll write you an excuse, say you have a medical appointment. Mom. Emma's voice was firm. I'm going. Emma, she humiliated you. Humiliated both of us. You shouldn't have to sit there and watch everyone treat her like some kind of hero. My daughter looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, aged too quickly. Exactly. I'll be there. The day of the assembly, I went through my morning patient rounds in a state of low-level anxiety. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a text from Emma, afraid of what might happen when she had to sit in that auditorium and watch Vanessa presented as an inspiration. At 2:30 p.m. my phone exploded with notifications. Not Facebook this time. Text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, links to Twitter posts and Instagram stories. I pulled over on my way to my next patient and opened the first link with shaking hands. Someone had recorded video from the assembly. The footage was shaky, shot from a student's phone, but the audio was clear enough. Vanessa stood on stage in a fitted blazer and designer heels, speaking into a microphone about overcoming obstacles and refusing to be a victim of circumstances. Behind her, a PowerPoint presentation showed photos from her career. Medical school graduation, surgical suite, before and after patient photos, her office with those floor-to-ceiling windows. The camera panned across the audience. Hundreds of students in their uniforms, some paying attention, others on their phones. Then it focused on Emma, sitting 3 rows from the front, her face carefully neutral. Vanessa finished her prepared speech to polite applause. The principal stepped forward to moderate Q&A. "We have time for a few questions," he said. "Please keep them respectful and relevant to Dr. Chin Patterson's career journey." Several hands went up. Students asked about medical school, about choosing a specialty, about work-life balance. Vanessa answered each question with practiced ease, her responses quotable and inspirational. Then Emma raised her hand. The principal nodded toward her. "Yes, young lady in the 3rd row." Emma stood up. The camera zoomed in on her face. She looked terrified and determined in equal measure. "Dr. Chin Patterson, you talk a lot about integrity in medicine and making ethical choices." Her voice shook but held steady. "What do you say to patients who experience complications from your procedures and can't get you to return their calls?" The auditorium went silent. Vanessa's smile froze on her face, becoming something rigid and unnatural. "That's an inappropriate and hypothetical question from someone who clearly doesn't understand medical practice." "It's not hypothetical," Emma continued. The camera showed students turning in their seats, pulling out their phones. "My mother is a CNA who cares for one of your patients, a 73-year-old woman suffering from complications you won't address. My mom sees real patient care every day. She works 3 jobs to support us after my dad died serving this community as a firefighter. You posted about her online 2 weeks ago, calling her life a failure, tagging her apartment for everyone to see. But my mom shows up for people when they're most vulnerable. She doesn't abandon them when things get difficult." A teacher moved toward Emma, trying to intervene. "But my daughter wasn't finished. You talk about choices, about discipline and smart decisions. My mom chose to help people even when it doesn't pay well, even when people like you look down on her for it. She chose integrity over image. What choice are you making when you ignore suffering you caused? When you use lawyers to silence patients instead of actually addressing their complications?" Vanessa's face had gone white. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked toward the principal as if expecting him to rescue her. This is inappropriate. I will not be subjected to baseless accusations by a student who—" "It's not baseless," Emma said. "I can name the patient. I can provide documentation. My question is simple. Do you believe in the medical oath you took, or just the lifestyle it provides?" Vanessa grabbed her belongings and walked off the stage. The auditorium erupted, some students gasping, others immediately recording and posting. The principal called for order, but the damage was done. The video ended. I sat in my car, hands covering my mouth, tears streaming down my face. My daughter, my careful, measured, anxious daughter, had just publicly confronted the woman who'd humiliated us both. Had stood up in front of her entire school and spoken truth to power, knowing the consequences she'd face. I called her immediately. She didn't answer. I texted, "Emma, I love you so much. Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I'm fine, Mom." In the principal's office. "They're calling you." The school called 10 minutes later. I listened to the principal explain that Emma had been disrespectful and made serious allegations, and would face disciplinary action, suspension possibly pending a review of the incident. "She told the truth," I said quietly. "Everything she said was factual. If Dr. Chin Patterson wants to deny it, she can. But my daughter has a right to speak. Mrs. Patterson, I understand emotions are high, but..." She watched your school invite the woman who publicly humiliated her family to be honored as a role model. She sat through a speech about integrity from someone who abandons her patients. And when given a chance to ask a question, she asked a legitimate one. If that's grounds for punishment, then your priorities are very clear. I hung up before he could respond. By the time I picked Emma up from school, the video had spread beyond Riverside Prep. Local Philadelphia Twitter accounts had shared it. Parent forums were debating it. Someone had sent it to a local news station. Emma got in the car silently. I pulled out of the parking lot, drove 2 blocks and then pulled over. "Are you in trouble?" I asked. "Probably." They're reviewing the incident. She made air quotes around the phrase. Mrs. Henderson wants me expelled. Says I defamed Dr. Patterson. Emma. I don't regret it, Mom. She turned to face me and her eyes held something I hadn't seen there in weeks, certainty. I've been watching you carry all this alone, pretending you're fine when I know you're not. I've been watching kids at school mock us because Aunt Vanessa decided to make our lives into her inspiration content. I couldn't just sit there and let her be treated like a hero when I know what she really is. I reached over and pulled my daughter into a hug across the center console, holding her while she cried for the first time since the post went viral. I'm so proud of you, I whispered. So incredibly proud. I was so scared, Mom. My voice was shaking the whole time. I know, baby. But you did it anyway. That's what courage is. We sat in my parked car for 10 minutes, just holding each other, finally acknowledging the pain we'd both been carrying alone. When we got home, I made us hot chocolate, the real kind with milk and actual cocoa powder, not the instant packets. We sat on our worn couch in our modest apartment, the place Vanessa had photographed as evidence of our failure, and I told Emma everything. About Margaret and her nerve damage. About the medical records with digitally altered photos. About the Facebook group full of women with similar stories. About the previous medical board investigation that had been buried. About Robert's role in referring patients and providing false testimony. Emma listened, her hot chocolate going cold in her hands. So what do we do? She asked finally. I don't know yet. But I think we stop being silent. My phone buzzed. An email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You don't know me, but we need to talk about Dr. Chin Patterson." I opened it. My name is Patricia Hendricks. I'm a medical malpractice attorney in Philadelphia. I've been tracking Dr. Chin Patterson for 18 months. I represent 3 clients with similar cases, but we've struggled to establish a pattern because victims are afraid to come forward. Your daughter's courage in that assembly, the video is everywhere now, made me realize there might be more evidence out there than I knew. If you have any information about other patients, about documentation, about anything that could help these cases be heard, I'd like to speak with you. No obligations, no pressure. But these cases deserve justice. These women deserve to be believed. Please consider contacting me. She left a phone number and an office address. I showed Emma the email. She read it twice, then looked at me. Mom, you have to call her. It's not that simple. Vanessa has expensive lawyers. Robert could lose his medical license if his involvement comes out. There could be retaliation. There's already retaliation, Emma interrupted. She already posted about us publicly. She already made my life hell at school. What more can she do? I thought about Margaret crying in her kitchen, believing the complications were somehow her fault. I thought about the 8 women in the Facebook group, carrying shame that didn't belong to them. I thought about Michael, who'd never hesitated when someone needed help, who'd run toward danger because that was what service meant. I picked up my phone and dialed Patricia Hendricks' number. She answered on the second ring. This is Patricia. Ms. Hendricks, my name is Claire Patterson. I got your email about Dr. Chin Patterson. And I think I have information you need to see. Patricia Hendricks met me at a coffee shop in Center City the next morning. She was in her early 50s, silver hair cut short, wearing a suit that suggested success but not ostentation. We sat in a back corner where our conversation wouldn't be overheard. I'd brought copies of everything. Margaret's medical records with the altered photos, the internal office communications I'd photographed, the documentation from the medical board investigation, my own catalog of the 8 cases I'd found in the support group. Patricia spread the papers across the table, reading carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but I saw her jaw tighten when she reached the emails showing Vanessa's deliberate avoidance of Margaret's calls. This is substantial, she said finally. More than substantial. This is evidence of systematic negligence and potential fraud. The altered photographs alone could support criminal charges, not just civil suits. I care for Margaret Walsh 3 times a week, I explained. She trusted me with these records because she didn't know what else to do. The cease and desist letter from Vanessa's lawyers terrified her. She's 73, widowed, living alone. She doesn't have the resources or energy to fight. She won't have to fight alone, Patricia said. I already represent 3 other patients with similar stories: complications, abandonment, legal intimidation. With Margaret's documentation and your research connecting more victims, we have a pattern. The medical board will have to reopen its investigation. And this time they won't be able to ignore it. My brother-in-law is implicated, I said quietly. Robert Patterson. He referred Margaret to Vanessa, testified on Vanessa's behalf during the first investigation. He's an orthopedic surgeon, respected in the medical community. This could destroy his career. Patricia met my eyes. Your brother-in-law chose to vouch for a surgeon he should have known was cutting corners. He chose to testify falsely to protect her when patients were being harmed. Those were his choices, Mrs. Patterson. Not yours. I nodded slowly. I know. It's just he's my late husband's brother. The only family connection Emma has to her father's side. And Dr. Chin Patterson is your sister-in-law, correct? She posted about you publicly, exposed your financial situation, led to your daughter being bullied at school. Yes. Patricia leaned forward. Family loyalty is important. But not when it enables harm. Not when it protects people who abuse power and hurt vulnerable patients. You're not betraying your family by speaking truth. You're protecting people who can't protect themselves. Over the next week, Patricia moved quickly. She contacted Margaret, explained the strength of the case, offered to represent her pro bono as part of a larger pattern of practice lawsuit. Margaret agreed immediately, relief evident in every word. Patricia reached out to the 3 patients she already represented, shared the new evidence, built connections between cases. She contacted women from the Facebook support group, offered consultations, collected documentation. Within 10 days she had 7 patients willing to come forward publicly. 7 women with stories of complications, abandonment, and intimidation. 7 sets of medical records showing similar patterns of negligence. She filed complaints with the Pennsylvania State Medical Board, this time with comprehensive documentation that couldn't be ignored or buried. She notified the State Insurance Commission about the fraudulent billing practices suggested by the altered photographs. She contacted the district attorney's office about potential criminal charges related to medical fraud. And she did one more thing. She called local investigative journalists, suggested they might want to look into patterns of patient harm at a prominent cosmetic surgery practice. Channel 6 News ran the first story 3 weeks after Emma's assembly speech. The reporter stood outside Vanessa's Center City practice, reading from a teleprompter. An investigation by this station has uncovered allegations of medical negligence and patient abandonment against Dr. Vanessa Chin Patterson, a cosmetic surgeon whose practice has been the subject of multiple complaints. We've spoken with 7 patients who describe similar experiences: complications following surgery, inability to reach Dr. Patterson for follow-up care, and legal threats when they attempted to seek accountability. The story included interviews with 3 of Patricia's clients, their faces pixelated for privacy, their voices altered. But their words were clear and powerful. She pressured me into procedures I didn't want, then abandoned me when complications developed. The person in the before photos she showed me doesn't match the person in my medical file. I think she manipulated the images to make my concerns look worse than they were. When I tried to file a complaint, her lawyer sent a letter threatening to sue me. I'm a retired teacher living on a fixed income. I couldn't afford to fight. The news story went viral. By that evening, Vanessa's Instagram had been flooded with comments demanding accountability. Her practice's phone lines were jammed with reporters requesting statements. The state medical board issued a press release announcing a formal investigation. I watched the coverage from my apartment, Emma beside me on the couch, both of us processing the magnitude of what had been set in motion. "Do you think she'll actually face consequences?" Emma asked quietly. "I think she'll have to answer questions she's been avoiding for a long time," I said. "Whether that translates to real consequences, suspension, license revocation, criminal charges, I don't know. But at least the women she hurt are finally being heard." My phone rang. Robert's name on the screen. I hadn't spoken to him since Vanessa's original post. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, let him face the consequences of his choices without explanation or comfort from me. But I answered. "Claire." His voice sounded destroyed. "I just saw the news. Did I provide evidence of Vanessa's negligence to a malpractice attorney?" Yes, I did. Silence on the other end. Then, you've destroyed my career. The medical board is reviewing my testimony from the previous investigation. They're questioning every referral I made to her practice. My own malpractice insurance is being audited. You destroyed your own career when you lied to protect her, I said, keeping my voice steady. When you referred patients to a surgeon you knew was cutting corners. When you chose loyalty to Vanessa over responsibility to patients. She's my wife, Claire. What was I supposed to do? Be the kind of Dr. Michael would have trusted, I said quietly. Be the kind of man your brother actually was. But you chose differently. And now you're facing the natural consequences of those choices. Another long silence. I'm sorry. About the post, about abandoning you after Michael died, about all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't help Margaret Walsh with her nerve damage. It doesn't help the other patients Vanessa harmed. And it doesn't change the fact that you enabled her for years. What do you want from me, Claire? I thought about that. What did I want from Robert? Punishment felt hollow. Revenge felt empty. What I actually wanted was for him to become someone different. Someone who prioritized integrity over comfort, patience over prestige. I want you to cooperate fully with the medical board investigation, I said finally. Provide honest testimony about what you knew and when you knew it. Help build the case against Vanessa if it means protecting future patients. And I want you to establish that fund you mentioned, the one in Michael's name for first responder families. Make it real, make it substantial, and actually help people who are struggling the way we've been struggling. I can do that, Robert said quietly. I will do that. Then maybe, eventually, Emma and I can have a relationship with you again. But it starts with you choosing differently than you have been. I hung up before he could respond. Emma looked at me with something like awe. That was really intense, Mom. Your dad would have handled it better, I said. He was always better at the hard conversations. I don't know, Emma said softly. I think he'd be pretty proud of how you handled it. The medical board suspended Vanessa's license 4 months after the investigation reopened. The suspension was pending a full disciplinary hearing scheduled for early next year, but the message was clear. She would not be practicing medicine while the investigation continued. Her practice closed. Her malpractice insurance dropped her coverage. 7 civil suits were filed, with more expected. The district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation into the fraudulent billing practices. Vanessa's Instagram went dark. The post about being blessed and making smart choices, the one that had tagged me in my apartment, was still there, but the comment section had become a space for former patients to share their stories. I never asked for it to be taken down. It served as a better testimony than anything I could have written. Robert did cooperate with the investigation. His testimony, combined with internal communications he provided from Vanessa's practice, helped establish the pattern of negligence and intimidation. His own medical license was placed under review, and he voluntarily took a leave of absence from his practice. But he also did something else. He established the Michael Patterson Memorial Fund with a $500,000 initial contribution. The fund provided financial assistance to families of first responders killed in the line of duty, helping with expenses like mortgage payments, college tuition, and medical bills. He asked me to serve on the board. I accepted. Emma finished her sophomore year at Riverside Prep. Some students apologized for their treatment after the post went viral. Others never acknowledged it. But Emma started a support group for scholarship students. A space where kids who didn't have vacation homes and designer bags could talk honestly about the challenges of attending a school built for wealth. The group grew to 30 members by the end of the year. Emma organized fundraisers for school supplies, created a textbook lending library, advocated for the administration to be more conscious of economic diversity in their programming. She was accepted to the summer pre-med program at Temple University with a full scholarship. As for me, I kept working as a home health aide. I still drove my 2009 Honda Civic to patient houses, still carried my medical bag, still provided care to people in their most vulnerable moments. But I also started doing something else. The Pennsylvania Home Healthcare Workers Association invited me to speak at their annual training conference. They wanted me to talk about patient advocacy, about recognizing signs of medical negligence, about understanding that home health aides see things doctors miss. I was terrified. Public speaking had never been my strength. I wasn't educated like Vanessa, wasn't polished or professional in the way people expected from conference speakers. But I showed up anyway. Standing at that podium looking out at 200 home health aides. Mostly women, mostly working multiple jobs, mostly invisible to the broader medical establishment, I found words I didn't know I had. You see what doctors don't see, I began, my voice shaking slightly but growing stronger. You're in patients' homes when they're most vulnerable. You notice the complications, the fear, the confusion. You see the medication bottles that don't match the prescriptions, the wounds that aren't healing right, the pain that's being dismissed or ignored. The room was completely silent, every face turned toward me. Your observations matter. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone tell you that your work is less important because it pays less or doesn't require a medical degree. Patient care isn't about prestige, it's about presence. It's about showing up, paying attention, advocating for people who can't always advocate for themselves. I talked about Margaret, about recognizing that her complications weren't normal. I talked about the importance of documenting concerns, about knowing when to escalate to a supervisor or call a patient's physician directly. I talked about the ethical responsibility we carried as the people who spent the most time with patients. Some of you have probably witnessed things that didn't seem right. Doctors who dismissed patient concerns, medical professionals who cut corners, situations where you knew something was wrong but didn't feel empowered to speak up. I paused, meeting eyes across the room. I'm asking you to find that power. Document what you see. Trust your training and your instincts. Connect patients with resources. And if you witness negligence or harm, report it. You might be the only person who can. The applause started before I finished my last sentence. It built and built until the entire room was on their feet. Afterward, dozens of aides approached me. They shared their own stories. Times they'd witnessed negligence, times they'd been dismissed by medical professionals, times they'd stayed silent because they assumed no one would listen. We exchanged contact information. I created an email list, started a newsletter. Planted seeds for what would eventually become a statewide network of home health advocates working to elevate patient care standards. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony with Emma, eating Chinese takeout from the place down the street. The food was still the same, modest, affordable, nothing fancy. But it tasted like celebration. Vanessa's post is still up, Emma said quietly, scrolling through her phone. People still comment on it sometimes. I set down my lo mein and looked at my daughter. Does it still bother you? Not really, she said slowly. I mean, it used to make me feel ashamed. Like maybe she was right, maybe we were failing somehow. But now when I see it, I just think about how wrong she was. About you, about what matters, about everything. She wasn't entirely wrong, I said carefully. We do struggle financially. I do work multiple jobs and still barely make ends meet. Those things are true. But she made it sound like that meant you were lazy or unmotivated or made bad choices. And that's not true at all. You work harder than anyone I know. You show up for people who need you. You changed everything for Margaret and those other patients. Emma paused. Vanessa has money and success and all these followers, but she hurt people to get there. You help people even when it costs you. That's not failure, Mom. That's the opposite. I pulled my daughter close, this brilliant, brave young woman who'd stood up in an auditorium full of her peers and spoken truth when it would have been so much easier to stay silent. You know what's wild? Emma continued. Madison Whitmore's mom, Mrs. Henderson, the one who invited Vanessa to speak at our school, she's apparently been calling the school asking them to take down the video of the assembly. Says it's hurting her reputation because she's the one who brought Vanessa in as a speaker. Is the school taking it down? The principal says it's already too widely distributed. Taking it down won't accomplish anything. Plus I think he's worried about the liability if he censors it now that there's a criminal investigation. Emma grinned. Also, I heard Madison got in trouble for the meme she made about you. Her parents got called in for a meeting about cyberbullying. I don't want Madison punished, I said automatically. She's a kid who made a mistake. Mom, she made a meme mocking your financial situation and circulated it to the entire sophomore class. That's not just a mistake, that's deliberately cruel. She can handle some consequences. I suppose that was fair. We finished our dinner as the sun set over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. From our balcony we couldn't see much. The parking lot, the neighboring buildings, the busy street below. Not the mainline mansions or the landscaped gardens or the marble desks with floor-to-ceiling windows. But we could see each other. We could see the life we'd built from the wreckage of losing Michael. Modest and difficult and precarious, but also real and honest and ours. Mom. Emma said quietly. Thank you for not giving up. I know it was scary going to that lawyer providing all that evidence. But you did it anyway. You went first, I reminded her. You stood up in that assembly when you had every reason to stay silent. You showed me what courage looked like. I learned it from you, Emma said simply. You've been showing me what courage looks like every single day since Dad died. I still think about Vanessa's post sometimes. About those words, so thankful I'm not still living like this. She was thankful she wasn't me. Wasn't living in a modest apartment, wasn't working multiple jobs, wasn't struggling to make ends meet while raising a daughter alone. And I understand that gratitude now in a way I couldn't when I first saw the post. She was grateful because on some level she knew how fragile her empire was. Knew that her success was built on foundations that couldn't bear scrutiny, manipulated photographs, abandoned patients, legal intimidation, and the complicity of people too afraid or comfortable to challenge her. She needed to position herself above me, needed to make my struggle into her triumph. Because without that comparison she'd have to confront the hollowness of what she'd actually built. I don't have marble desks or floor-to-ceiling windows. I don't have 45,000 Instagram followers or a curated feed of success. I have cracked hands from constant sanitizing, a car with 200,000 miles on it now, an apartment that will never appear in architectural magazines. But I also have patients who trust me with their most vulnerable moments. I have a daughter who learned to speak up when silence felt safer. I have a network of home health workers who found their voices because I found mine first. I have the knowledge that when Margaret Walsh needed someone to see her suffering and believe her, I showed up. And I have the memory of Michael, not as someone I failed by not maintaining the life we had when he was alive, but as someone who'd be proud of the life I chose to build after he was gone. A life of service over prestige, integrity over image, presence over performance. Vanessa's post is still there on Facebook, a permanent record of her cruelty and my supposed failure. But every time someone finds it now, they also find the comments telling a different story. The story of patients speaking up, of investigations uncovering truth, of systems being challenged. They find evidence that power isn't about wealth or status or social media followers. It's about showing up with integrity when no one's watching, speaking up when silence feels safer, and recognizing that the most essential work is often done by the most overlooked people. That evening on the balcony with Emma, eating our Chinese food and watching the sun set over our imperfect, difficult, honest life, I thought about sending Vanessa a message. Not vindictive, not cruel, just true. I drafted it in my head. Thank you for the post. It hurt, but it also woke me up. Made me realize I'd been carrying shame that didn't belong to me. Made me see that silence was costing more than speaking up ever could. You tried to make my life into evidence of your success. Instead, you gave me the clarity to recognize my own strength. But I didn't send it. Vanessa would have to carry her own reckoning without my participation. Instead, I deleted Facebook from my phone entirely. Chose to stop measuring my life against other people's curated versions of reality. Emma got accepted to 3 more summer programs, all with scholarships, all in fields she was passionate about. She chose neuroscience research at Penn. Robert's fund provided assistance to 12 first responder families in its first 6 months. He called occasionally, carefully rebuilding connection, respecting boundaries, showing up in small but consistent ways. Margaret's nerve damage improved slightly with physical therapy, though she'd never fully recover. But she smiled more, laughed more, started painting again, watercolors of the garden she could see from her kitchen window. The 7 patients in Patricia's lawsuit received settlements that covered their corrective surgeries and provided some compensation for their suffering. More importantly, they received validation. Official acknowledgement that what they experienced wasn't their fault, that their concerns were legitimate, that they deserved better care. And I kept working. Kept showing up at patient houses with my medical bag and my dry, cracked hands and my gentle smile. Kept documenting vitals and administering medications and listening to stories. Kept advocating for people who couldn't always advocate for themselves. The work didn't change. But I changed. I stopped apologizing for my life. Stopped seeing my circumstances as evidence of failure. Started understanding that showing up with integrity in an unjust system was its own form of success. Harder won and more valuable than any marble desk or floor-to-ceiling windows. Emma saw that shift in me and it shifted something in her too. She stopped shrinking in hallways, stopped apologizing for her scholarship status, started claiming space she'd always deserved. We were the same people in the same apartment facing the same struggles. But we were carrying it differently now, not as shame but as dignity. Not as evidence of our failures, but as testimony to our resilience. Vanessa's post tried to tell one story about my life. But the truth, the real, complicated, difficult, beautiful truth, was something she never understood and never could. My life wasn't a cautionary tale. It was a testament to survival, to service, to the quiet courage of showing up every day even when no one's watching, even when the work is hard and the recognition is scarce and the pay is barely enough. That's not failure. That's not something to escape or be thankful for avoiding. That's grace under pressure. That's integrity in action. That's the kind of life that actually matters when you strip away all the performance and pretense. And I wouldn't trade it, not for all the marble desks and Instagram followers in the world. If this story of quiet strength turning into powerful justice kept you hooked until the very end, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Emma stood up in that assembly and spoke truth to power, defending her mother in front of the entire school. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more inspiring stories of everyday heroes finding their voice.